Welcome to the Journal Editorial Report. I'm Paul Gigot. Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel resigned this week after just 20 months at the helm of the Pentagon, reportedly pushed out by President Obama, in a move that further consolidates national security decision-making in the White House and raises questions about the direction of the administration's foreign policy its last 2 years. For more, I'm joined by Wall Street Journal columnist and deputy editor Dan Hinninger, Foreign Affairs columnist Bret Stephens, and editorial board member Matt Kaminsky. So what's fascinating here, Matt, is that many on the right and the left, in talking about the Hagel's resignation, basically say the problem with Obama's foreign policy wasn't Hagel, it's in the White House.
Well, the thing is, Chuck Hagel was really a non-entity as the chief at the Pentagon. You know, he started out very badly, if you remember, at his confirmation hearings. He could never articulate the policy. And then, of course, after he was thrown over, the White House spun that he was really not up to the job. Of course, they picked him for the job in the first place, but he was not the problem with the foreign policy.
Well, wait a minute. Well, you say he was a non-entity. That's the White House spin. But is that fair? Or was this the real problem, the fact that the White House wanted to make all the decisions? They hired him as a so-called implementer of the policy, and as the world changed, he decided, hey, maybe our policy needs to change, and he started representing the generals who didn't really like the Obama foreign policy.
Well, I'm not sure how much support he really had in-house at the Pentagon. I mean, he was really not going to go down as one of the stronger secretaries of defense. But again, he was immaterial to the failures of the foreign policy because the foreign policy is so centralized. And in fact, I think the reason why they pushed him out was because he was not the yes man they thought they were putting in there.
Exactly.
That he was pushing back at the end. He was frustrated, but he had no influence. So I think, is it bad that he's gone? Probably not.
He said how he spoke up and said with Martin Dempsey, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, that ISIS was a bigger threat than the White House was admitting. Yeah. He pushed back on Syria and said, your policy lacks clarity. We need to get clarity if we're going to succeed against ISIS. And the White House certainly didn't like that, Brad.
No, that's absolutely true. And I guess you can give him a point or two for finally sort of seeing the light. But let's face it, this was an incompetent Secretary of Defense who had his agenda, which was mainly a personal agenda, to serve in that office. And then you have an incompetent national security process in the White House, and the two of them simply didn't get along. Now, this could be an opportunity for the president to really pivot on defense issues, really pivot on national security, choose a strong, capable Secretary of Defense in the mold of some of the previous two, like Leon Panetta and Robert Gates. My guess is that what the president is going to want is another factotum in the Pentagon so he can continue to run defense policy out of the White House.
I mean, confidence is not high that that kind of pivot is going to
Paul, confidence is not high anywhere in the world about the Obama foreign policy. I mean, there's sort of an irony here. One of the criticisms that came out of the Pentagon was that the White House insists on micromanaging policy. But the Pentagon also said that they could not get decisions out of this White House, that their ability to make decisions is very weak. And, you know, that's what you hear in the capitals all over the world. The Saudis would say to people, what is Obama's strategic policy in this region? Because we'll get visited by a Secretary of Defense and Secretary of State, and they're all coming in with different ideas about what we should be doing.
And I will say, I mean, we're not making this up.
Right.
Everybody who comes through from any country, Europe, Middle East, or so on, they all have the same message.
No strategic vision.
What is the policy?
Yeah, the policy of the Obama administration is to have less foreign policy and to hope to offshore our problems or strategic problems to some other countries, except when it really matters to the administration. For instance, Iran. So there is this sense of a shrinking American footprint, and allies from Japan to Israel to the Baltic states and Poland are asking themselves, where's the United States?
Is there a sign of a larger shakeup here in the staff?
I don't think so. I think this is basically the only head that's going to fall, and they went out of their way to praise John Kerry at State. Susan Rice seems like it's going to stay in put as the national security advisor. But the crisis of confidence is also, I think, in the Obama administration. I keep hearing in Washington
inside
because things have clearly not worked for them. And if you work on a team where things are not working out, even President Obama might have some self-doubts.
And that's why you have some of this sniping as Hagel goes out the door, most unseemly. I mean, this is not what, I mean, they had that dog and pony show where they shook hands in the White House and everything seemed to be
what was astonishing is this was several weeks in the making. This didn't just happen overnight. The president didn't wake up in the morning and decide to fire Chuck Hagel. What I don't understand is, why don't they have a replacement? ready to go right away. This is, I mean, we're living in a period of serious national security crises. That's not an office you want to leave unfilled for a matter of months or have a vacuum there.
But who would want to take the job?
Who would want to take the job? You can't take this job unless you're willing to be a yes man for, as Matt suggested, do what the president wants you to do. John Kerry got that climate deal with China. He's now pursuing the agreement with Iran. Chuck Hagel started to push back on Guantanamo and the Middle East. He was out of there. Who are they going to find who just says yes to
Well, Michelle
president?
Flournoy was one of the favorites leagued by the White House as somebody, former Undersecretary of State, Undersecretary of Defense. She took herself out, I think, for precisely that reason. It would not be a job that would be easy to take. Problem is, we've still got 2 more years of this administration.